In this episode, we discuss why the government will no longer be giving cash awards to junior athletes who have won international awards. We also provide a quick update on PM Modi's visit to France. But first, we talk about what led Biren Singh to finally resign from his post. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. The ethnic conflict in Manipur between the dominant Meiteis and the Kuki-Zomi community has been going on for nearly 2 years now. The violence has led to the deaths of over 200 people, displaced thousands, and has caused a complete breakdown of law and order in the state. And throughout this period, one thing that had really stood out was that despite the unrest unfolding under his leadership, Chief Minister Biren Singh had refused to step down. However, that changed on Sunday when Singh finally submitted his resignation to Governor Ajay Kumar Bhalla in Imphal.
So the violence began nearly 2 years ago. On May 3rd, 2023, Biren Singh had first become the Chief Minister of Manipur back in 2017. So this was during his second term as the Chief Minister.
That's the Indian Express's Sukrita Baruah, who reports on the state for the paper.
Right from the beginning, in fact, before the conflict itself, his government had been making moves that were beginning to antagonize the Kuki-Zo community.
This, for example, included his allegations of widespread illegal immigration and his war on drugs, which allegedly was targeted specifically towards the Kuki-Zomi community.
So tensions had been simmering for a while, right? When the violence broke out on May 3rd, 2023, right from the very beginning, the Kuki-Zo community, different organizations and leaders held him to be responsible for the outbreak of the conflict. And right from the beginning, this is a problem that we're seeing throughout, right? That there is no political dialogue happening. Even if there are, say, spells of 2-3 months when there's no overt incidents of violence happening, we're not seeing constructive dialogue happening between the two communities. And something that Kuki-Zo groups, kept pointing out was that, we will not talk while Biren Singh is on the table.
So the Kuki-Zo community had been pushing for his removal right from the beginning. And among those opposing his leadership also included 7 Kuki-Zo MLAs who are part of the BJP government in the state.
On the other hand, of course, the Manipur Congress obviously has been pushing against Biren Singh. Nationwide, the Manipur issue is not a local issue, it's a national issue. Nationwide, there's been scrutiny on the kind of leadership, not just of Biren Singh, of course, but also of the centre. And over time, at the beginning, there was this perception, and some people did refer to Biren Singh as some kind of a leader of the Meitei community and so on. But, that's not been the case. There has been waning popularity because there is widespread disenchantment, there's widespread distress in Manipur against the way that, against the non-resolution of this conflict. So this is widespread amongst the Meitei community as well. This we saw in the results for the 2024 Lok Sabha election, where both inner Manipur, which is mostly the Meitei majority valley, and the outer Manipur seat, which is the Kuki and Naga Hills, they were held by the NDA. Both of these were won by the Congress. And, when I had reported on the elections at the time, everyone was saying that this is to register our discontent against the handling of the crisis. So, the political popularity had waned. There was opposition from different ends. But what finally led to this seems to have been internal political pressure.
She says that there are many who are pointing out that this is not a question of accountability, but of political expedience. And this is because yesterday, that is on Monday, Manipur's budget session was scheduled to take place.
And dissident MLAs within the BJP in Manipur from the valley, from the Meitei majority valley, were the ones who had been mounting pressure for Biren Singh's removal. And that seems to be what has finally changed things, because it's not just a question of, Biren Singh refusing to resign, but the centre had been backing him throughout, despite, a section of his MLAs, including the Speaker of the Manipur Legislative Assembly and one of Biren Singh's own cabinet ministers, Yumnam Khemchand. They had been part of the group of dissident MLAs. And they had approached the central BJP, registering their discontent, including to the Prime Minister's office last October. But the centre continued to back him. So now, something seems to have tipped the balance finally, to push the center to finally pull out its support to him.
In fact, one of the factors that seems to have turned the tide is the no confidence motion that the Congress party was planning to introduce in the assembly.
So that seems to be one of the crucial turning points, right? So this is the pressure that had been building up over the last week, 2 weeks. So like I said, the Manipur Assembly session was set to begin on February 10th. And the pressure from these dissident BJP MLAs in the valley had begun to mount. And there was speculation about them closing ranks, finally. And I spoke to some of them last week, and they were saying, we've waited enough. We're unhappy with the way the center is handling this and, with Biren Singh's continuing leadership. And now, like I said, they've been complaining and airing grievances for a long time now, but they hadn't exactly been taking a solid stand, So they're saying, now we're ready to, I quote, do something big and unprecedented in the assembly session unless there is a change before the assembly session. So during that time, they didn't wish to specify to me what their planned course of action was. Now that everything is done, they admit that there had been talks by the Manipur Congress of introducing a no confidence motion. But in a house of 60 MLAs, there are just 5 Congress MLAs. So it seems that they were building up momentum to give leave to admit a no confidence motion and eventually support it, right?
She says the speaker, Satyabrata Singh, had in fact travelled to Delhi last week to meet the BJP National President JP Nadda to tell him about this crisis.
According to our sources and, insider information, he told JP Nadda that, the assembly has to convene soon and in all likelihood there's going to be a no confidence motion. And when he was asked if he can do something to avert the situation, he apparently said that, there's nothing I can do about it. And soon after, Yumnam Khemchand, the dissident minister, also travelled to Delhi. And he also met central leaders and informed them that, the government is going to collapse unless there's a decisive change. So these movements had been happening, and Biren Singh himself travelled to Delhi sometime last week. And there was a lot of speculation, what this meeting is about. And from what we learned, he was denied audience with the Union Home Minister. So instead, we saw a lot of images of the cabinet colleagues who are his loyalists going to Mahakumbh instead and, taking a dip and all of that. But days later, again, he travelled to Delhi on Saturday evening. And he apparently met with Amit Shah and JP Nadda for a long extended meeting, at the end of which the decision was taken that he has to resign.
Right, and Sukrita, besides all this, there are also these leaked audio tapes which the Central Forensic Science Laboratory is examining right now. And even the Supreme Court has asked for a sealed cover report about these tapes from the laboratory. Could you talk about these leaked audio tapes and the extent to which they might have played a role in all of this, especially with the Supreme Court seeking the report?
Right. So, of course, everything we say is speculation, right? From the no confidence motion pressure, that's also something we know that was happening. But if that was indeed what finally turned things, we don't know. Again, this leaked audio tapes issue has been around for a long time. So there are these tapes where a person can be heard speaking. It sounds like Biren Singh, where the person, seems to be admitting complicity. I mean, the statements being made admit complicity in stoking the violence in the state. And these have been spoken about the Kukizo community for a long time. Then they were admitted in the Supreme Court. And like you said, most recently, the Supreme Court asked the CFSL to submit a report in a sealed cover. So this is the pressure that had been mounting. And like I said, right from the beginning, there were allegations of him playing a key role in the starting of the violence by the Kukizo community. So we don't know for sure to what extent that would have played a role, but that was another pressure that was definitely mounting. And that hearing is yet to take place.
And Sukrita, we mentioned how this violence has been going on for about 2 years, 21 months to be specific. And throughout this time, the BJP has backed Biren Singh, right? Do we know why it continued to do so despite mounting pressure, despite all that was happening under him?
So our colleague Liz Matthew and Deeptiman Tiwari, both of them do cover central BJP politics. So according to their inputs, there are a variety of reasons that have been cited. I mean, there are reasons that are given and there are reasons that are behind the scenes that no one will admit to. So starting from, the fact that it was just too late. If a decisive move had to be taken. It should have been taken 21 or 20 months ago. And it would just be a huge embarrassment to take a step that should have been taken such a long. Then it would be seen as caving to opposition pressure. That is one aspect of it. The other is that, according to an input by one of our colleagues, the central leadership never saw Biren Singh as being responsible. They say that Manipur has always been disturbed. It was disturbed under Congress's rule, under the chief ministership of Okram Ibobi Singh. So this is no different. And Ibobi didn't resign, so why should Biren? Just a variety of reasons. Also, one of the gravest allegations against Biren Singh is that he abetted and supported the functioning of, armed groups such as Arambai Tengol, who we have seen in the past, summoning all the MLAs in Imphal and holding a meeting and even assaulting some of the MLAs. So it is alleged that they have the patronage of Biren Singh. So also, these other moving variables, what happens to these groups, if Biren Singh resigns. So there's a lot of moving parts. We don't have clear answers for any of these questions. This seems to be a bouquet of factors, but these are some of them.
And do we know what will happen now? Is there going to be president's rule? Is there anyone who can take Biren Singh's position right now?
So there are claimants. Within the dissident group, I named two prominent leaders within the dissident group. They are likely candidates if there is to be, another chief minister. That again, everything at this point is speculation. It's a very uncertain point in the state's trajectory right now. Like I said, the assembly session was supposed to begin on February 10th. So after these developments, the governor issued a notification nixing it. So it's not going to happen now. So it's on hold for now. There are inputs that the assembly might be in suspended animation for a while. And right now, the governor has asked Biren Singh to continue to hold fort until, I quote, alternative arrangements are made. So amongst the things floating around is that there could be president's rule for some time, for a few months, and until another chief minister is chosen or such, because the BJP continues to have absolute majority, right? So one of the dissident MLAs, said that it would not be a good look to have full and, extended president's rule, given that the BJP does have 37 out of 60 MLAs in the Manipur Assembly. Its ally Naga People's Front has 5 seats. Another ally, though, who withdrew support specifically to Biren Singh's government, they could come back, which is the National People's Party, which has 6 MLAs currently because one of their MLAs passed away last month. So with this kind of a majority, that leader was saying it's not a good look to have extended president's rule. There should be another leader and another chief minister. Of course, on both sides of the ethnic divide, there are going to be a variety of reactions to either course of action, because amongst the Kukizo groups, the push will be for president's rule. Because one leader I spoke to yesterday said that, having another BJP Mete leader be the chief minister is, I quote, old wine in a new bottle. And what they want is, to interact directly with the center. So president's rule would enable that, is their perspective. So from the Kukizo side, the push will be for full president's rule. And we'll hear a variety of opinions, but I do think that in the valley, there will be clamor for a new chief minister now with Biren Singh gone.
And next we talk about a major policy shift undertaken by the Sports Ministry, which came into effect on the 1st of February. According to this change, junior athletes winning international medals will no longer receive cash awards from the government. Now, one of the main reasons for this policy shift, the ministry says, is aimed at tackling the twin menace of doping and age fraud, as well as keeping the hunger of youngsters alive. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Mihir Vasavda, the co-host of our sports podcast, he told us more about it.
So we've seen too many times in the last decade or more than a decade where a lot of junior athletes are pushed into these wrongdoings, be it, fudging their age, be it taking banned drugs to enhance performances for those quick gains. Now, if you are an overage competing, say, with person who is legitimately competing in the under 18 or under 14 categories, then you have that distinct physical, mental advantage where you go on and win, and then you're incentivized for those wins. Similarly for doping as well, if you are taking performance enhancing drugs, you have an unfair advantage over your competitors.
He says, according to the old system, a gold medal, say at the Junior World Championship, would fetch an athlete approximately 13 lakh rupees, while a top podium finish at the Asian or the Commonwealth Games had a cash prize of 5 lakh rupees.
That is a big amount, especially since a lot of India's athletes come from humble backgrounds, from rural or, tier 2/3 areas. They aren't from big cities with, families that are well off. So this is a big incentive, according to the policymakers, why they are pushed into wrongdoings. And also, let's not forget, in some cases, if the athlete nominates, then the coaches are also entitled to some prize money, 30% of whatever amount is set aside for them. So the whole thinking behind this is to curb this menace, as well as another big thing that we keep talking is in India, there is so much focus and there is so much celebration around junior achievements, whereas in the developed, more mature sporting countries, junior sports events are just seen as a developmental thing, where you go there, you perform, you get a feel of what it's like to compete against a person from XYZ country, or be around a big venue where you have 100 countries participating. You get that exposure so that when you're transitioning from junior to senior, you know what environment you're getting into.
For example, he says that one of the most successful teams in the Under-17 Football World Cup is actually Nigeria. And he says that this is because the European countries see Under-17 as a developmental competition.
We've seen too many examples of that, say, for example, in loads of Olympic sports in Indian context too. So this whole push where you have overemphasis on junior programs, they are hoping that by not incentivizing it, they're taking away that pressure to perform or a little bit of attention away from it and treat juniors as it's supposed to be. And that is a developmental thing.
When we are talking about sports, you're right. In India, sports often become a means for upward mobility in that sense because of the cash prizes you get. And so does this move end up affecting that? And maybe you can also talk a bit more about how it affects the motivation of these athletes.
Yeah, of course. And we've seen an example of this. I won't name names because, well, it's unfair to kind of, unless we know the actual story by speaking to the athlete, we don't know. But we've seen instances, say, for example, a few players from the Junior World Cup winning hockey team in 2016. There were players who were celebrated and who were then paraded in the streets. They were given cash awards, etc., etc. And they were at, 18, 19 years old. That kind of, pushed them into this whole zone of complacency. The cash rewards were enough for them to last an entire lifetime. So they didn't really have to work hard for that. And like you said, for Indian athletes, a lot of Indian athletes, sport is a way to kind of move out of poverty. So once they have enough to live by comfortably, and that the assumption is that it affects the motivation to work harder. Because let's face it, like any other industry, the moment you transition from junior to senior, your work rate, the amount of effort you need to put in also multiplies 100 times. So if you're not motivated enough, it's easy for you to kind of fall by the wayside. And we've seen many examples of that in Indian sport.
Right. So for those whose end goal is just money, they often end up leaving the sport. But what the government wants are people who are genuinely interested in the sport, people who can pursue it even beyond the junior level.
That's what, as India gets more and more ambitious when it comes to sport, and it's important to keep this in context that in the next 10 years, India is expecting or hoping or aspiring to host many, many important international tournaments. For those tournaments, you'll need a lot of young players to come through the ranks and participate as well. Now, this isn't what government has said, but this is my assumption that the more athletes you have coming through the programs, the more junior athletes you produce, there are more chances of them winning. And that means that you'll have to give more prize money. So it's also to, I think, in a way, keep the budget in check, because until, say, the number of Indians winning at the junior world championship or the senior world championship level 15 years ago, 20 years ago, was far fewer than what it is right now. And there is no reason not to believe that in the next 10 years, that number will multiply even further. So you want policy corrections at this stage rather than waking up 10 years later and regretting, because a lot of your budget then goes into cash prizes and not developing athletes. So the problem is with junior, like we discussed at the beginning, is the short-sightedness, right? Some people looking for quick fixes where you just try to take a gamble. It's a high risk, high reward scenario where you try to kind of get your way around the system. You fudge your age, perhaps, you sniff a thing or two which you shouldn't be, or inject a thing or two which you shouldn't be doing, and get that unfair advantage over someone who is of genuine age, competing with all the fair means. And then you get ahead of them, get ahead in the race, and pocket whatever rewards that you can along the way. And who cares? I mean, then whether you succeed or not in the seniors, that transition anyway, like we've seen so many cases where the transition from junior to senior isn't that smooth. And then their thinking could be that, it's okay, we'll be one of those many athletes.
And since we're talking about doping, can you talk about just how big of a problem that continues to be in India, and particularly in the junior section?
So if you were to take the doping data of the last 3 years, 22, 23 and 24, around 10% of the dope cheats caught in India were minors. That is a big number. And we're talking about a list that was released in January. So you would have a few athletes who would have, just turned adults in the last month. So if you were to check in December, I guess that number would have been a little higher. But the number of minors caught doping in the last 3 years has been pretty high, around 22 out of 204 or 205 or something like that, if I remember correctly. So that's also another important aspect to this.
And we understand that besides this, the award policy for senior athletes has also changed now. Can you tell us about those changes a bit?
So again, it's more about rationalizing it. The more Indians participate, the more Indians get better at sport, the more they're going to win. So certain competitions like the Commonwealth Championships, where the level of competition is pretty average, it's not, your elite level competition. There won't be any prize money going forward for that. Similarly, for the South Asian Games, which anyway happen very regularly, and you're largely competing with South Asian nations, not India's direct competitors, there's no more cash incentive for that too. The other interesting change, I think, my understanding is that it came into effect after Manu Bakar's 2 bronze medals at Paris Olympics, because earlier the policy was that if you win 2 medals at a World Championship or 3 medals at a World Championship or an Olympics, you'll still get cash prize for the 1 medal as laid down in things. So if you see the policy before it got amended starting this month, it stated that for a bronze medal at the Olympics, the government would give an athlete rupees 30 lakh. Some in Manu Bakar's camp, in her entourage, said that Manu has won 2 medals, so why is she getting just cash prize for 1? And that's what happened. She was given 30 lakh. Now it clearly says that athletes in World Championships and Olympics, they'll be rewarded for each medal won. So going forward, if an Indian athlete wins more than 1 medal at the Olympics or the World Championship, they'll get the cash prize for each medal they win.
And in the end, we talk about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to France. PM Modi departed for France yesterday to co-chair the Artificial Intelligence Action Summit with French President Emmanuel Macron. The summit, scheduled for today, the 11th of February, is expected to announce the creation of a foundation focused on AI in the public interest, with a particular emphasis on the global south. India's invitation to co-chair the AI summit is seen as a recognition of its growing role in emerging technologies and its approach to AI governance. While China remains a dominant player in the field, France's decision to collaborate with India underscores the importance of shared values and strategic alignment. The summit will provide India with a platform to contribute towards the development of AI in an inclusive, responsible, and equitable manner, and to address associated risks and issues of ethics, governance, and accessibility. India and France are also set to make key announcements, including plans to advance civil nuclear cooperation and to develop small modular reactors. Additionally, the two nations will also launch an India-France Triangular Development Cooperation Initiative and declare 2026 as the India-France Innovation Year. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.